Very privileged to introduce our keynote speaker. For some, he is not a stranger, if you'll remember back to the John L. Scott Industry Forum several years ago. But I want to read this because there's a very important introduction for Simon. Simon T. Bailey is a leader of the Spark movement, whose purpose is to ignite sustainable transformation in people, systems, and nations. Wow. He equips you with the mindset to increase your value, the skill sets, and the fortitude to thrive in any economy. Simon has spoken at our industry forum, like I said, and he's an influence on many of us. Please join me in welcoming Simon T. Bailey. Hello, oh brilliant one.
Hello, oh brilliant one.
It's so good to see you.
Hey there. How you doing, Lennox?
Hey, great, Simon. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
It is so good to see you.
Good to see you. And thank you for having me.
What a privilege to have you. You have so much to say. I am not going to say anything else. Please bring to us your brilliance and your spark and your light, because our world needs it, and we do. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. So appreciate it. Well, hello, everyone. And for those of you that I'm meeting for the first time, I live in a little small town called Windermere, Florida, which is on the backside of Disney and just about 30 minutes from Orlando, Florida. I'm the proud father of two amazing children. Daniel is 21, Madison is 18. Daniel's in college. Madison goes to college next week. I just turned 52 years of age yesterday, so here we are. 30 years of experience in the hospitality industry, and I've had an opportunity to work with 1,800 organizations in 49 countries since I left Disney. And I'm so happy to spend this time with you because over the last 6 weeks, I've been invited by CEOs to be on panels to have this whole conversation around how do we create a culture where everyone matters. So Dr. Lee did an exceptional job in really setting me up, and I so thoroughly enjoyed everything that she had to share. So with your permission, I'm just going to build on that. And the first thing I want us to think about is before we can look through the windshield of creating a culture where everyone matters, I want to invite us to look through the rearview mirror to really understand, as Dr. Lee said, how did we get to this point? So, as you probably recall, just a few months ago, George Floyd was murdered, and that sparked protests in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. But if you've been following the news, then you know that Jacob Blake was shot in his back 7 times by a police officer, and that sparked protests in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And if you continue to follow what's happening, the question comes up, how did we get here? So let me take you back to history. Back in 1787, the founding fathers of America were deciding how many seats would be needed in Congress based on votes and how they would pass laws. And it was decided that slaves would only be counted as 3/5 a human, just 3/5 a human. And when you think about that, the prevailing mindset that has been embedded in the culture of America is that whites are superior and blacks are inferior. Now, I know that might make you feel uncomfortable, but to help understand the frustration and why would the NBA teams boycott playing on last evening, it's because they believe something has to change. Because if it doesn't change, we'll be at this movie again 50 years from now. And I believe all of you, as brilliant real estate agents in John L. Scott Realty, you have the opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to wake up, stand up, and speak up. Now, let me put this into context, and I want to use the Minneapolis-St. Paul cities as an example. They are affectionately known as the Twin Cities because it will really help us understand not only how did we get to this moment, but why is there frustration throughout the company and even there in the Seattle area where there's been protesting that's been going on, in Portland protesting, and certainly parts around the United States and around the world. The National Public Radio, Planet Money, released an interesting study about the Twin Cities, and it said that the median household income for whites in the Minneapolis area is about $84,000. But for Black families in the Twin Cities, the median household income is $38,000. It is one of the most impoverished areas for Black Americans in all of the United States. But guess what? The state or the city that is worse than the Twin Cities for the income inequality of whites and Blacks is Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Hold on to that just for a moment. The other interesting thing is they went through the study. They said that if 3/4 of white families in the Twin Cities own their own homes, then Black families, only 1/4 of Black families in the Twin Cities own their own homes. The incarceration rate in the Twin Cities is 11 times greater than whites in that area. And the educational achievement gap is horrific. In fact, the Twin Cities, according to this study, has one of the worst educational achievements among Blacks in the country. When you look at that, let me share some other research with you as it relates to education, because we often hear that education is the equalizer. The Gallup organization did an interesting study where they looked at 5th to 12th graders. And at this particular time of the study, just a few years ago, they said that there are 75 million students in 5th to 12th grade. Now, to put that in context, there are 330 million people that live here in the greatest country in the world, the United States of America. So 75 million are in 5th to 12th grade. The Gallup scientists discovered that 30% of the 5th to 12th graders will not graduate on time. And 30% of them that don't graduate on time will drop out of school. And as you can imagine, they were predominantly African American and Hispanic. And when the Gallup scientists did the deeper research to understand why is it that 5th to 12th graders will not finish school on time and drop out, it wasn't as if the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was not giving towards education. It's not as if the John L. Scott Foundation wasn't giving towards education. The Gallup scientists realize the reason children drop out of school and eventually drop out of life is because they lose hope for the future. And when they lose hope, they become frustrated as they see the American dream slipping through their fingers. That's how the protests was sparked in Minneapolis, because the words, "I can't breathe," came to symbolize that the system of racial injustice has its knee on my neck, and I will never be able to close the economic income gap. I'll never be able to own a home. I won't be able to really achieve as it relates to education. The system is against me. So thus you have protests that went all over the country and the world, because I can't breathe really came to symbolize something deeper. Now, with that backdrop, you probably say, okay, Simon, why is this so important? And why do I believe all of you in the real estate profession right now, you have the ability to be hope pushers? You have the ability to spark hope in those that aspire, who have been marginalized by racial injustice, income inequality. You have the ability to help them have hope in the American dream, and that is owning a home. But I want to build on this just a little bit more. I'm going to take you through some slides. I'm going to give you 7 things to think about, 7 ideas to really help you think about how do we create a culture everyone matters? How do we wake up, stand up, and speak up? So, as you can imagine, being a Black male here in America, it's a bit challenging. As a father of 2 children who are Black Americans, and certainly having a Black son, it's very challenging because you probably have never had this conversation with your son or daughter about what to do when the police show up or pull you over. I'm curious, and you can post it in the chat, and Emmanuel, tell me if anybody responds to this question, yes or no. How many of you have ever had to have the talk, air quotes, with your children about what to do if you're pulled over by the police? And Emmanuel, you could let me know.
I'm watching, Simon. Personally, I have had, because my children are biracial, and I've had a similar conversation with my son when he wanted dreadlocks. And he was going to be treated differently than the captain of his lacrosse team that had dreadlocks, but a white kid. My Black son having dreadlocks was going to be treated differently. So it wasn't being stopped by police, but just how society was going to look at him and maybe judge his abilities, because it was going to be different.
Wow.
Not seeing anything just yet, but I would have to assume that some of us have had that conversation.
Wow. So for those of you who are saying, what's the talk? So the talk goes like this in my household. Daniel, Madison, if you're ever pulled over, what is our protocol? What do we do? Dad, my hands are at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock. I say, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, officer. How are you today? Officer, my license is in my back pocket. I'm going to reach and get my license out of my back pocket so that I can show you my license, officer. Officer, my insurance and registration is in the glove compartment of my car. May I reach over and get the insurance and registration to show you? Officer, thank you so much. That's the conversation. That's the talk that I have to have with my son and daughter. I'll give you one more example. My children come over every other weekend to stay with me. They still like to hang out with dad. And this particular day was a Friday afternoon, about 1:30 in the afternoon. And Daniel says, hey, Dad, I'm going to go to the community pool here in our subdivision. I said, absolutely. I said, take a book with you, because I just kind of know how our world can be at times. So sure enough, he goes to the pool, has a book with him. And about a half hour later, I receive a phone call from the sheriff's department saying, are you the father of Daniel? I said, yes. And this is not the call that a father wants to get, because you don't know where this conversation is going. He said, your son was here at the pool. He's not in trouble. He was minding his business, but someone noticed him at the pool and did not recognize him and called the police. So the officer walks my son back home. It's about a 5 to 7 minute walk through the neighborhood in the middle of the day, rings the doorbell, and I say, good afternoon, officer. Thank you so much for walking my son back home. My son comes in, we say goodbye to the officer, I close the door. He just looks at me. I have no words. I have no words. What do I say? Right? And so unconscious bias, that's what's happening real time in our world. And just another little small story to bring this closer to home. And then I want to shift gears and give you some practical things to begin to think about. This just happened to me within the last 24 hours. I have the distinct honor of being a co-chair of a group, an industry group in my profession of the top 1% speakers in the world, co-chairing this group, have co-chaired the group for the last 2 years. I received an email yesterday from my other co-chair to say, hey, just want to let you know, the new chair reached out to me to tell me that he is going to be assuming our chairship. And he just wanted to have a conversation with me about what it's like to lead the group. And so my co-chair, who is white, sent the email to me. And I said to him, this is a teachable moment, because he knows that I'm co-chair, the new gentleman that is coming in his chair, but he never sent the email to me. So I'm going to have an off the record conversation with him to help him understand that he missed a moment to be inclusive and to make sure he saw me as an equal, and I'm not finding out on the back end. So it's just examples, because it makes us think about, how are we showing up every single day? So with that said, I would love to go to the slides and share with you the first slide. And as you look at this first slide, what you'll notice is that CEOs all over the country, they are waking up, standing up, speaking up, and lending their voice to say, how do we be a part of the solution? Next slide. And as we think about being a part of the solution, it's really, how do we establish a culture where everyone matters? So if you're taking notes, I want you to think of culture is the invisible hand within an organization that causes the organization to behave and make decisions every single day that reinforce the story and the strategy of the culture. See, culture is just not making an anti-racist statement and putting it on the website of an organization. It's a great start. It's an important start, and it's an important thing to say, hey, I'm woke. I am all about how do I be an anti-racist. That's awesome. That's very nice, very sweet, and very special. But it's the invisible hands in the organization that shows up every single day to say, what's the story of our culture? How do we live this out on the streets in what we do every single day? Next slide. So ultimately, creating a culture where everyone matters is really establishing psychological safety. And psychological safety, John L. Scott Realty, is to really understand, how do we create that environment where individuals can come and do business with us as they buy a home or sell a home or invest in real estate with you, that when they leave your presence, not only did they feel psychologically safe, but they become the unofficial marketing department for a realtor that cared about them, that gave them honest feedback and allowed them to get a piece of the American dream. Next slide. So psychological safety, once we understand that, when you look at this, the power of diversity and inclusion is not only do we solve problems faster, but another research study says that organizations that specifically focus on diversity and inclusion, their profitability increases 25% more because of the intention, the invisible hands, to behave and develop the habits that tell a consistent story. Next slide. So when we begin to understand that, here are 7 ways to activate your knowledge. So when you look at CEO commitment, the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago, pre-COVID, took their entire board and key leaders, put them on a plane, went to Alabama, and they began to tour different Black history places, from the Rosa Parks Museum, to just understand, what is racial injustice? Why have people been fighting and having this conversation for years? But they didn't stop there. When they got back to Chicago, they decided to go into the Latino community, understand what is happening real time in these communities. I believe that you have a great leader in Lennox because he just doesn't talk it, he lives it. And all of you have the ability to live it, because what John L. Scott is doing is you have moved from a rational commitment to an emotional commitment. A rational commitment is this is what we have to do because it's politically correct. But emotional commitment is we do this every single day, not because we have to, but because we want to. And so it starts at the top. When you have that emotional commitment, it takes everything to the next level. When you look at being a champion, the CEO of Denny's has decided every supplier that they deal with, they will specifically look for Black suppliers to fulfill the needs that they have as a restaurant chain, or as they affectionately call themselves, America's Diner, because they believe it's not just enough to talk, but how do we ensure that Black suppliers have an opportunity to know that they matter? Accountability is to look at how do we hold people accountable to ensure that they matter. So Realogy.com, they are looking at how do they recruit diverse agents, not just to sell real estate around the country, but how are they ensuring that when they recruit diverse realtors, how do they ensure that they move to the top agent list? How are they setting them up for success? And how do they hold themselves accountable to recruit them? But because they believe that when diverse communities see diverse agents as top agents, it sends a message that this organization is totally dialed in. Another example of accountability is there is a mortgage company out of North Texas, and they are specifically looking at how do they recruit Black mortgage officers as they think about their business, looking at whatever others could see, but thinking about it differently. And then it's not just enough to start down this path. A little becomes a lot over a long period of time. What is it that we can do to stay consistent? I have discovered in even Equity Residential, which is a $2 billion real estate investment fund, they have created a micro website, a micro platform where weekly they post videos, articles around this whole conversation of diversity and inclusion and equity, right? What else can we do, John L. Scott Realty? What else can we do to stay consistent in this work? Another thing to think about as it relates to being consistent, there's an organization that's based in Silicon Valley, and their whole focus is around taking a tiny pulse. The organization is called Tiny Pulse, and they take a tiny pulse to see how are we doing as a culture? How are we doing as a business? What would it be like to give feedback, to share, to say, hey, what if, can we try this, right? So it's just not enough to start down this road of creating the culture where everyone matters. It's really looking at the blocking and tackling. What are we doing daily to set people up for success? And then when I talk about being a sponsor and an ally, I'll never forget. I have 30 years of experience, 6 different companies, 10 different jobs. My last job was sales director and new business development director for the Disney Institute. And as you look at me today, I'm going to let you in a little secret. It took me 2 years to get hired at Disney. That's right, 2 years, 10 interviews, right? And eventually they hired me because I think they figured out, okay, he is not going away. So they hired me. And I was overwhelmed because I went from a small organization of 100 employees, now working in an organization where there are over 64,000 people working within 47 square miles, and they're all singing, "It's a small world after all." And so I was overwhelmed. I only planned to stay 90 days and then move on because I didn't have a buddy or an ally. And as fate would have it, day 89, I received a call from the recruiter who recruited me for 2 years. And she said, "How's it going?" And I said, "When I hit the 90-day mark tomorrow, I am out of here. I'm gone. I can't get anything done. I can't figure it out." And she said, everything that you need to succeed is not written in the employee handbook. I was like, duh, really? Tell me more. I was like, huh? And she said, I'm going to connect you with two gentlemen. One was Brad Rex. Another gentleman was Jim Lewis. And what would have only been 90 days in my Disney career turned out to be 7 years because those two guys became my sponsor and my ally. What would it be like for you to look throughout your amazing organization, look throughout your team and say, do we have diverse men and women, Black Americans who have joined this amazing company? And can we be an ally? Can we teach them the unwritten rules of engagement? Can we sponsor them? See, the difference between a mentor and a mentor tells people what they've done, but a sponsor, he or she wears the brand t-shirt when no one is looking and will help that person advance in their career. I am standing here today because there is someone who doesn't look like me who decided to be my sponsor and my ally. That's what you can do. Look around you and say, if I really want to stand up, wake up, speak up, who am I sponsoring? Who can I just make a difference in the life of one person, one family that will change a generation? And then how do we think about inspecting what we expect? How often are we looking within our offices, within our teams, as we're selling homes, as we're doing business and saying, how are we doing as it relates to fair housing, as Dr. Lee talked about a moment ago? And what am I going to do every day in every way to not only continue the conversation, but to recognize microaggressions, unconscious bias, and use it as a teaching moment? It's really moving from unconscious incompetence, I don't know what I don't know, to unconscious competence that I know and I'm practicing every day to create a culture, story, invisible hand that aligns with the direction that we're going. And then how do I remain curious? Wow. So many people say, okay, Simon, how do I remain curious and continue to have the mindset, the skill set, the will set to sustain this long term? Guess what? It starts at the dinner table. When was the last time you invited someone to your house that didn't look like you? If everyone in your circle of influence looks like you, Socratic method of learning, could it be that your circle is small? Just a question. And if you say, Simon, I'm an introvert, that's a bit much to invite somebody over my house that I don't know. Okay, what would it be like to go out to dinner with someone that you don't know, that you become curious about? Do you know what PricewaterhouseCoopers is doing right now? Not only have they given money to the National Urban League, to NAACP, and all these organizations that are on the front line of addressing poverty and ending racial justice, they have decided over the next 2 years to commit 30 of their leaders to specifically address racial injustice in communities around the United States. So for 2 years, these 30 individuals would be paid by PwC and they will go and be a leader or executive in residence with nonprofit organizations to come alongside and really help them understand, how do we address education? How do we address all of the atrocities of marginalized Black Americans or any individual that feels that they do not have access to the American dream? So if you want to do some reading, I would encourage you to pick up the book, The Color of Law. Pick up the book, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. Pick up the book, White Frailty. If you want to see a movie, I would encourage you to go and see Just Mercy in Netflix. On Apple TV, they've released a movie called The Banker. For those of you in real estate, you will love this movie. Samuel L. Jackson, absolutely phenomenal. And if you say, I want to go even deeper, look at in Netflix, there's a movie called Marshall, and it will just give you insight to ensure that you are curious. Because the moment you stop learning, you stop growing. And when you stop growing, you put your head in the sand and you don't get a chance to stand up. and speak out. Now, next slide, please. I believe that we all have an opportunity in this moment to do something. And I love what Melinda Gates is doing with Pivotal Ventures. If you were to go to pivotalventures.com and see what she's doing, it's specifically investing in women and minority owned businesses to give them a hand up, not a hand out. Let me just say something very, 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 very important, John L. Scott Realty. Black people, I don't speak for all Black people, but I speak as a Black American. So what I'm going to say is going to be very opinionated, but is because of what I know and where I've been. I've written 10 books and I've been to 49 countries. I've seen a lot of different things. Black people don't want a hand out. They want a hand up. And I believe the greatest opportunity that you have right now, if you look at what Melinda is doing, is to give this hand out or hand up. Next slide, please. So when you look at this photo, perhaps you'll recognize Marilyn Monroe sitting next to her good friend, Ella Fitzgerald. Back in the 1950s, they developed a relationship, and Ella Fitzgerald shared with Marilyn Monroe that she wanted to perform at the Mocambo, which at that particular time was a famous club in Los Angeles. But for whatever reason, the club owner denied her performing, even though she had been successful in what they called the Chitlin circuit back during that time where Blacks could only perform. They could never be major headliners at the major clubs. Well, Marilyn Monroe, who realized her star power was amazing at that time, she called the club owner and said, I will come to your club every night for a week if you will allow my friend Ella Fitzgerald to perform. And that happened in November 1954. Marilyn Monroe showed up, the press was there, the club was packed, and Ella Fitzgerald performed for an entire week, all because of her friend, Marilyn Monroe, who woke up, stood up, and spoke out. Everyone can do something. Here's my question for you. What can you do? What can you do? In one of the greatest professions is a real estate. What can you do? So, Emmanuel, I'm going to stop there with that question. If we have any other questions, I'll be happy to field them.
I have a couple. And first, thank you. Thank you. How can you explain that more inclusion is better for all and not a zero-sum game?
Wow. So, the way I would explain inclusion is better for all is, do we come from a place of abundance or scarcity? The abundant mindset, or what you like to talk about within your culture, walking in joy and walking in abundance, is that there's enough pie, Emmanuel, to go around for everyone. So if I take a slice of the pie and you take a slice of the pie, it doesn't mean that I lose, you gain. We all gain and grow together. So when we think about inclusion, the reality is I need you and you need me. Let me give you a different perspective. If you've ever been to a Black church, one of the things that people will know that a Black church is known for music that moves the soul. Well, Black people generally clap on 2 and 4. But when you bring your white friend to church, that white friend claps on 1 and 3. But here's the point. When your white friend comes to the Black church and everyone is clapping on 1 and 3 or 2 and 4, you never miss a beat. So when we understand that, that's the beauty of inclusion. We never miss a beat.
I love that. As a music director, you're so right. One last question. I follow you on social and you shine brightly. I think about a week ago, you said, write a to-be list, not a to-do list. What does that mean for you? And what do you do when there are days that you know you should shine, but you don't feel brilliant?
Yeah. So those days that you don't feel brilliant, the to be list is to be grateful for where you are and what you have. If you have survived COVID-19 and have not been directly impacted by it, what would it be like to be grateful for that? To be instead of to do is how do I be a better citizen, a better human? How do I be comforting and caring and connecting and hugging people with my words? That's the to be instead of to do. So when you have those days that you don't feel brilliant, find a way to upgrade your verbal software, understanding that language is the software of the mind, and begin to understand when I be, I will have, then I will do.
Oof, that preaches. Simon, what an absolute honor, pleasure, delight. You've spoken not just with eloquence, but you're right about the choices we've made as a company, that it's an emotional decision, not just an intellectual or a business decision. And I think in part because the influence you have on so many of us and the way you've helped us to listen better and to show up differently. Thank you, friend, for being with us. What an honor and a privilege it is to have someone of your caliber and of your stature to share with us. Thank you so very much, my friend, and
Thank you, my friend.
blessings to you.
Thank you.